Well, welcome, everyone. I'm Ed Knight. I'm with Nasdaq. We're over the hump of Davos, so it's kind of, you can start relaxing maybe, and it'll be over soon. I hope everyone's been having a great Davos. I've been looking forward to this session with you, Majid. From my perspective, we're talking about the future here, about optimism. I wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for somebody that by the name of John F. Kennedy, who inspired me as a young man. He said in 1960, we're going to put a man in the 61 on the moon. People didn't think we could do it. He said a year later, why are we doing this? Not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And those are the things worth doing. And NASDAQ today benefits from that leadership. I was talking last night to CEO of a space company that services the space station and does experiments and creates polymers and does other things. All of that wouldn't be happening on NASDAQ if it hadn't been for that leadership. But it wasn't easy to get to the moon. And it involved our capital markets. It still does. NASDAQ is honored to be part of, have a partnership with your stock exchange and help build those capital markets. So today, we want to talk about investment, NEOM, the NEOM Investment Fund, and the vision for that, and the vision for NEOM. And maybe we can start there. How do you see that as the leader of the NEOM Investment Fund and the vision of NEOM? How do you put the two together?
Thanks, Ed, and a real pleasure and honor to have you here moderating this session. I think to start off with a little bit more context, especially for the audience around NEOM, as NEOM is one of the most aspirational projects today globally, I think it really resonates when you talk about moonshot projects in terms of putting people on the moon. The aspirations of what NEOM wants to become and wants to deliver is a futuristic urban development that really needs to resonate with the people that live there as a sustainable mode of operation. That could be a poster child, but that could be a real model for the rest of the world. In terms of the things that we talk about, how do we create a sustainable urban development? And how can we do it at such scale that people in the future can live into? Our role at the NEOM Investment Fund is really there to support and enable that through investments, through forging the right partnerships with the large multinational companies, with smaller startup companies, in terms of bringing in those partners to help us deliver on that. And so with NEOM being a wide region, a separate administrative region, that's going to have sub-regions that are being master developed, and I'm sure people here in the NEOM House here at Davos were able to see and show what was showcased as the different parts of what Trojena is there to offer, what Sindala, what Magna, what the line, which ultimately is the lion's share of the region, is going to look like. But those are all supported by 15 economic sectors. And those economic sectors that range from energy, food, water, media, but it also goes into sports and e-gaming and fashion and the rest of it, design and construction, which was part of the discussion in the previous session, not just how do we build a sustainable project, but how do we build it sustainably and how do we get there? Our role is really there to help forge those relationships with the large companies that are going to help us build it. How do we acquire technologies and bring them over? And how do we bring out infrastructure projects for the private sector to help participate in?
I want to talk about probably an overused word, but frankly a word we use a lot at NASDAQ too. It's ecosystem. And a lot of people think, well, if you open a NASDAQ stock market in my country, then we will have Google, you know, and add a little water and everything. We are beneficiaries of an ecosystem in the United States that's built up over centuries, frankly, of investors, technology, education system, a culture, all these things that make our capital markets work. You're building an ecosystem too, And the kingdom has been very innovative about the use of sovereign wealth funds. Can you talk a little about sovereign wealth funds and the ecosystem you're trying to build? You touched upon it, but I'd like you to expand that.
No, I think that's an important point to bring out. Sovereign wealth funds traditionally have a role, one of two roles that they mainly play. They're either a wealth preserver, and so you're going to see a lot of sovereign wealth funds that are just basically putting money into assets, putting money into projects, putting money into other funds, into capital markets, diversifying the asset management book to ensure that there is returns that are commensurate with their investment policies. And Norges, for example, the largest, I think it's still the largest sovereign wealth fund today, continues to do that. Closer to home is the Public Investment Fund. That is what is a real example of an ecosystem developer. So the Public Investment Fund is putting a lot of capital, a lot of investment, and a lot of effort to actually build out an ecosystem in Saudi Arabia. Case in point being NEOM, one of the largest giga projects that sits under the PIF. But the PIF is also building Qiddiya, Dir'iyya, Amana, Red Sea, the expansion of Riyadh, the expansion of the infrastructure in the country. All of that churn of funding that's coming in is jump-starting a new economy or a new sector that traditionally hasn't been there. So the focus is to diversify away from oil is one of the pillars of their strategy. Job creation of national champions. So they recently invested into the largest EPC construction companies, 4 of them, in order for them to be able to have enablers that help to deliver on the projects that they are also investing into. And so when you take a look at their strategy as part of their Vision Realization Program, their VRP, it really is a very succinct strategy that says, here's our vision, here's where we want to get to, and we're actually going to put a lot of that capital in to develop that ecosystem that's going to continue to be perpetual and perpetuate itself going forward. That is a sovereign wealth fund strategy that is very different than wealth preservation. Mm-hmm. The NEOM Investment Fund is essentially a baby replica of the PIF. And so what the PIF is to the base economy, NIF, the NEOM Investment Fund, is to the NEOM region. So you could think of us as a regional wealth fund, but in our early days, a lot of our focus really is to help jumpstart an economy through powering the 15 economic sectors.
So NASDAQ is very active in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and if you all have been to Washington, the Chamber building is across from the White House. And so when heads of state, finance ministers come, the business community comes together. But when a senior minister from Saudi Arabia comes, they have to rent a big hotel ballroom because there's so much interest in the U.S. business community. And I think part of the reason for that is there is a history of success of partnering with the business community that the kingdom has. When you make a commitment, you follow through. What is the philosophy? How do you achieve that? How important is the business-government partnership concept in your investment and in NEOM?
I would characterize it as critical. We're not going to be able to build all the ambitions that have been set out as part of Vision 2030 just with government funding, even with the deep pockets of Saudi Arabia. It does require to have a lot of public partnerships coming in. And so, when we touched on what sovereign wealth funds do as an ecosystem developer in terms of bringing in new industries that are diversified, creating regional, national champions, but they're also trying to bring in technologies, but the funding becomes a very important factor. So FDI and enticing foreign direct investments to come in and be part of that is also part of the role that most sovereign wealth funds are really trying to do. And that is something that we're also very mindful of. I think there's no shortage of capital that's looking for great projects, you know? Everybody's looking for a home and a place to actually invest into. Our role is to ensure that those projects are clear, they are bankable, they are investable, they have a return metric that is interesting for investors, that we are working in a business environment that is conducive to attracting foreign direct investments and partners and developers to come in, that there is a longevity of sustainable projects, there is liquidity in the market. So all of these characteristics of what would be interesting for investors to come in are things that, you know, the government is taking into consideration. The public investment funds, sovereign wealth funds, but also NIF and NEOM are coming at it at the project level. So each and every project that we put out to the market in terms of, you know, here's a PPP, here's what we need as a build, own, transfer that requires 25 years out of investments from the public side, are things that we are carefully looking and curating in order for investors and developers to really come into. I think one of the nicest examples that we really can showcase was the green hydrogen project. Mm-hmm. That was a three-way joint venture, close to about $9 billion of capital. 6.2 billion was project financed. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting isn't the 6.2 billion, it was how much it was oversubscribed. It was the amount of oversubscription. We got to 13 billion of commitments coming in to say we want to participate into this project, but we can only take 6. So again, that's the case in point that there is no shortage of capital for the right types of opportunities. It is on us to ensure that those opportunities are there. And sometimes the public investment fund or sovereign wealth funds need to come in to help provide those guarantees. I think just as a final point on NEOM, one of the hardest points is that you are really a greenfield project, literally very green, there's nothing out there. And in order for people to really come in as investors, they want to have that self-comfort to say, there's going to be a demand, there's going to be an economy, there's going to be churn. And so until that point in time takes place, you know, a public investment fund or a NEOM needs to provide that level of comfort and those guarantees in the very beginning. But over the years, and as people start coming in and the economy starts churning, that goes away. And so you'll see, as typical with everywhere else, incentives and subsidies are very high at the beginning, and over time they start dissipating.
So let's take a case where you've invested in a tangible way and there have been tangible results because of NEOM and your vision. So autonomous vehicles. You invested in Pony AI. Can you explain the logic behind that and how that fits with the vision of NEOM? And this company just went public on NASDAQ, yep. So there's a liquidity event that came out of it for the investing public. And so a successful execution on the vision, but how does that fit with your thinking?
No, that's a great example, and thank you for bringing that one up, Ed. I think that really just shows, you know, we talk about deglobalization, but actually there are sometimes wonderful stories for us to really point to. So a little context for the audience. Pony AI is a Chinese-based company that provides robotaxis. These are cars that are basically autonomous. And I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to sit in the back seat with the founder. And there was nobody in the driver's seat. There was nobody in the passenger seat. And we were driving through a city in China at speed and avoiding traffic. And I remember there was, we were at a traffic light, somebody ran a red light, the car stopped and went on. There was somebody who was going to weave in on us. It stopped, it honked its horn, and kept going. So to actually be there and actually feel what autonomous vehicle driving is real surreal. We wanted to bring that technology in. And so when we do our investment strategies across the 15 sectors, mobility was one of the key ones. When we invest into mobility, we're talking about the customer journey. And the customer journey starts with when they arrive at the airport, through that experience, what aviation did they use, what type of modes of mobility and transportation are taking them to their destinations. And so we invested across a different array of investments. Regent is a sea glider that is fully electric. We invested into an eVTOL company. We invested into Boom, which is a supersonic aircraft that's being developed. We invested into Zero Avia, which is using a powertrain that feeds hydrogen. All of it is sustainable. Pony was a great example where we not just invested, but created a joint venture with them. And so we're a strategic investor, so it's not just about putting money into the companies and having a turn. It's about what we do with the companies after the investment. And so the joint venture really is there to bring in a fleet of robotaxis. Of course, you need regulatory approvals in order for vehicles to be running autonomously. That means you need to have milk runs between different destinations, ensuring safety. That takes a little bit of time, but then you really have a sprawling of those autonomous vehicles. And employees of NEOM would basically go from the airport, NEOM Airport Bay, to the base camp, to different destinations, with autonomous vehicles just calling through an app. That is already, taking a real leap in terms of what a future NEOM would look like. So our work is really not just about the investment, even though it did launch on the Nasdaq at a 5.4 billion valuation, so it hit 15% increase. So it was lucrative. It always happens at Nasdaq. No pitch there, but so it was lucrative for us from a financial perspective. It was very clear for us from a strategic perspective how we bring in that technology, and then how are we creating a business that is there to last, and then taking that business not just to NEOM, but actually bringing it back to the base economy of Saudi Arabia. But having NEOM being in the living lab, where you're trialing a lot of these technologies, and once you're ready and comforted and you've got the right certification, then you can actually broaden it into the region.
I want to go back to the public-private partnership, just personally curious, because I've seen this in other places where a CEO will meet with the head of state and have an agreement about a project. And then 6 months later, someone in the state government has a different view, and the lack of coordination. Right. But in the kingdom, there seems to be behind the scenes a system that identifies those priorities and makes sure that, as John F. Kennedy said, there's always someone who doesn't get the message, to make sure that that throughout the government, they get the message, this is happening. How does that happen?
It's an interesting one. Look, I think it's not unique as to the dynamics that you kind of pointed out to. It takes place in every government, in every company. We have the privilege of having the level of advocacy at NEOM at the highest level. And when you have the level of advocacy that we have, where His Royal Highness is personally attending board meetings, casting the direction, and it's very clear as to what the ambitions and the aspirations are, and he continues to push the envelope in terms of what we really want to deliver for the world as a real example, it sets the course as to what moonshots really mean. There are competing projects, there are competing service providers, competing technologies. The most difficult part for us is actually deciding who we want to work with. Right. And so a lot of our work and time is spent on working with the community, evaluating different technologies, doing a competitive landscape, visiting, trying to make sure that, we're backing the right horse. But a lot of it really depends on what we want to do with those companies thereafter. We're long-term partners. We're not coming in for a quick hit and run or one type of purchase. No, we really want to continue to develop. And so a lot of the value really sits in the relationship that we are building with our partners to say, here's the NEOM, here's the aspiration. How are we going to get there together? And through that relationship build out, we understand who's like-minded, who really has the propensity to want to go the long haul, because these do take a very long time to achieve. And then through that level of partnership, we structure the right deals.
So I want to talk about two areas that I know the investment fund is focused on and that NEOM is focused on, and how you attract partners and work with them. And you alluded to hydrogen, but sustainability, and then also Pony AI innovation technology. So those are two major pillars, right, of your investment philosophy and thesis?
We think of investments as a means to an end, right? I think the most important thing is, how do we bring in technologies? How do we start up new businesses? How do we bring in partners to help us out? Now, if it requires an investment to the topco, that's what we're going to do. If it's a joint development agreement, that's what we're going to. If it's a joint venture, that's how it's going to look like. The green hydrogen is a three-way joint venture between NEOM, Aqua, and Air Products. You know, $8.6 billion. Nice. But we're also doing venture capital investments of 10 and 15, 20, $30 million into the companies. But there's also money that's there to help on the deployment of that technology. So putting money into the topco is one thing, but there's a lot of work that we're doing in terms of how we bring in that technology close into NEOM. So a little bit about just one maybe point about clarifying the NIF role. Our role really is to help propel NEOM and the economic sectors forward. We do that through putting out large infrastructure projects into the market. So these are PPPs that are being put out as auctions or BOTs. We're doing joint ventures. We're doing acquisitions. We're also doing venture capital. So it's across the array of different transaction asset classes that we're trying to work with. We structure the right deals that require, as we discussed earlier, what type of guarantees, or if something's a bit more mature. And I can tell you, each and every one of those 15 sectors have a different need.
Right.
Some of them are pretty early in terms of, you know, if we thought about biotech, they want to go a little earlier. When we think about energy, they want to go into late stage so that they can take that technology that's a little bit more proven, you know, TRL 7 or 8 or 9, and then bringing it over to NEOM and try to really scale it. So the needs are very different. So that's why we are seen as being more agnostic in terms of stages of investment. But we need to make sure that we have all the tools ready available in order for us to be able to execute.
Let's talk a moment about your time horizon. The investment minister has called NEOM a generational project, and the perspective should be over a generation. You not only are obviously directly investing, but you're attracting foreign investment, $24 billion last year of successful attraction. How do you see that trend, and how do you look at it? What's your time horizon and perspective in looking at that?
I mean, the time horizon isn't one that has a date to say we're done. You know, I mean, nobody says, you know, is Dubai done? No, it continues. And so I think what we have is milestones. And so we have milestones on delivery of certain regions, of certain assets, of certain businesses. We have milestones that we're delivering in 2030. We have milestones delivering in 2035. We just won the FIFA World Cup, where one of the stadiums are going to be in NEOM. So we have to deliver on that. We have the Asian Winter Games taking place at the end of 2029. We need to deliver on that in Trojana. So I think in terms of timeline horizons, I think there is a continuation. But we also know that jump-starting a new economy, jump-starting a new ecosystem is one of the most difficult things. Mm-hmm. To be very thoughtful about how we do that, you know, I think the learners will tell you, you start with export. So we're talking about manufacturing. Oxagon is our industrial region. That is our first port of call in order for businesses to be anchored and localized. And so there's a lot of effort that we're working on now, early days, in terms of bringing in new advanced manufacturing into Oxagon in order for that to be a hub that would help on the export side. We actually, just in the FII in October, we just signed $1 billion fund with our partners in China, or with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and the PIF, in order for that fund to really help to catalyze businesses coming in from the East and to localize their advanced manufacturing into NEOM. So there's a huge amount of interest of businesses to want to internationalize, and they're seeing Oxagon as being one of the key hubs of where they feel like it's at the cusp of where Europe is, close to the Suez Canal. 13% of global trade comes right through there. So there's a lot of great value proposition, 100% renewable energy powering an industrial city, all those value propositions become very interesting for people to want to move and expand their operations. And there's an opportunity for us to help them come in through the fund structures that we just discussed.
At NASDAQ, people think about technology, and a lot of the IPOs we do are in the tech area. But one area that people aren't always focused on, but that makes up a huge segment of new companies and early stage high growth companies is the healthcare area. And there's a lot of optimism about how AI will affect that area and help find new cures. There's been a recent announcement around NEOM and the biotech area as something that you want to focus on at NEOM. Can you talk a little about that?
AI is the theme here in Davos this year. And when we talk about AI, there is a value chain that one needs to think about. For example, we touched on manufacturing. Semiconductor chips and fabrication of chips is fundamental to be able to produce the right chips for AI technologies that doesn't require the huge amounts of energy. And so fabless types of companies that are coming up with the right designs become an area of interest for our investment. Mm-hmm. When we think of the line and how much of a cognitive city, you can only think about the IoTs and the amount of video and cameras and all that sensory that's going to be there that would help people deliver on services. In order for that to be a smart city or a cognitive city, you're going to require an incredible amount of chips. You're going to require an incredible amount of AI power, data centers, sustainable type of energy that's going into data centers. So the entire theme of having sustainable, lower energy usage is part of an investment thesis on its own. And so when we go into our investment thesis, this is the type of value chain that we think about. And how is that going to serve as AI as an enabler to the healthcare system, to biotech, to some of the other facets that we have in NEOM? And today, in our early days, we're really making sure that we have those enablers as our first port of focus.
So I'd like to turn it over to the audience to see if there are questions that you'd like to ask Majid.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful conversation. I quote Kennedy all the time. That's a wonderful quote. I'm a Texan, so Houston had a role to play in playing that. I'm sorry, excuse me. I've ridden in the back of a Waymo vehicle, and it's pretty scary the first time, but now you can go on Uber and Lyft and get a vehicle. I'm in Phoenix. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Arizona State University, or ASU. I've been to NEOM. We're working with Vasilios and Andreas, your NEOM U partners there on that side, and we're very excited about the future. Many of those folks you're talking about that will be powering these regions in NEOM will have to come out of an education system, and we're going to help build your faculty and help build out that whole human capital infrastructure, inshallah, which is very, very powerful. So speaking of education, you didn't speak to it specifically, but I wonder, as the head of the investment fund, where you see education, continuous learning, NEOM U, et cetera. And by the way, Minister Al-Fallah, His Excellency, is a rock star. We had a feast with him with Michael Crow when I was there, and he was like walking down the street with a hip-hop artist. Everybody just crowned. He's a wonderful leader.
Well, he's a big fan of Arizona State University as well, so yeah. No, thank you for the question. Look, I think I would come at it from the talent side. What makes an economy, what makes an ecosystem thrive is the people. And today, NEOM doesn't have the right people there, but they are going to require the right type of talent, attracting the right type of talent in order for us to be able to deliver on the technologies and the innovations that we're trying to put out to the world. ERI, or Education, Research, and Innovation, is one of the key sectors of the 15, and we have a huge amount of effort that we're trying to set up. But right now, today, and I think you've been working with Andreas and the team, on setting up universities, setting up programs, disciplines. The discussions we're having is which disciplines are more required to be in NEOM versus what we can leave to the base economy. And so, for example, we touched on semiconductor and fabless. If that is an area of a center of excellence, then that is who we want to be able to attract over. And those are the type of curriculums and programs that we also want to bring in so that it becomes a center of excellence. If biotech and health and well-being, certain themes of it are going to be an area where, oh, NEOM is the destination for dealing with CRISPR technologies, for example, then people will start to be able to really hone in and focus all efforts to be known for that. And so I think there is an effort or a strategy to say, how do we want to differentiate ourselves? How do we want to be known for what type of brand? And then what are the different facets that are going to work towards that? That's really how we tackle these problems.
I think we've just got time for one more question. So do we have one more question?
Hello, I am a climate tech investor in New York. We invested in New Lab, among others, you might know. What's beyond NEOM? Because you're going to showcase amazing technologies. And I personally care a lot about the acceleration of the acceleration. How can we spread those technologies all over the world and really getting things done? How do you see the role of NEOM to showcase great technologies and then bring them to the rest of the world? And how do you think you're going to do that?
Great question. I think, look, from what I see, a lot of in order for technologies to grow and thrive, it really is about a couple of things. You've got to de-risk that technology adoption. And I'm seeing how Saudi Arabia is actually coming in a very big way to say, we're not just talking about sustainability, we're actually acting on it. NEOM is, at the heart of it and at its core, is all about sustainability. And sometimes we get this done in terms of, how ambitious the aspirations are, but that is exactly the moonshots where visionaries come in and say, this is our North Star, this is what we're working towards, and this is how much money and effort and human capital that we're going to be putting, and corralling the entire ministries and governments and companies to be able to deliver on that. When we take a technology and we scale it and prove it out, that's basically lowering the bar in terms of technology adoption. Now, then you need to get into how does it make real perpetual business case growing forward, and then you need the economies of scale that really comes into that. One thing we're trying to work on, for example, at scale, just that comes to mind now, is the energy mix, the storage mix that we need to have. So if we talk about 100% renewable energy, that means in the nighttime, you're going to need to have an array of different storage capacities that are going to be able to come in during nighttime. Pumped hydro storage is a conventional way, but the way we are thinking about it at a scale that is incredibly huge, $3-4 billion of a project that we want to put out to the market, basically that's going to ensure that pumped hydro storage is a mechanical way, but a proven way for it to be commercially viable. And when you've industrialized it, or even you've proven it out at such a scale, that levelized cost of electricity or levelized cost of storage curve comes down, and then the adoption rate starts coming in. So I think when NEOM saying that we are a living lab, we have a voracious appetite to try out technologies. That means there's a lot of money that's going to be put into that. Some of it is going to win, some of it is not. But that is what Saudi Arabia is saying that, we're already offering to the world. We want to take those bets and take that risk in order for those technologies to be coming out of NEOM and proven out, and then the rest of the world can adopt. We have many different technologies that we're trying out, working with different sectors across NEOM, all 15. And I think, fast forward 10 years from now, many of these technologies will start to become developed within NEOM, not from outside coming into NEOM. So I think it's a journey, and we're a long-term player, and I think we're very clear as to what our ambitions are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Majid. Thanks, Edward. A very insightful session. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our panelists.
Thank you.